No one likes to be called a noob, but we've all been there. It's that dreaded moment when you realize you're the new kid on the block. We greatly appreciate your acceptance of your noob title. We're also positive one day you'll be granted access to the No Lifers Club. But until then, we're sure you'll understand this video better than you'd like to admit. Now before we go into our number 1 pick, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And for more awesome countdowns like this one, and all your video game news, subscribe to The Gamer. Number 10. Disappointment in character selection. You know all those times you went to your grandmother's house and there were no freshly baked chocolate chip cookies awaiting your arrival, but then there was your aunt waiting to pinch your adorable cheeks? Yeah, that's kinda what new players felt like when they finally got their hands on Pokemon Red, only to discover there was going to be no Pikachu to start off with. Pokemon Red and Blue were released in 1998 and quickly gained a cult following in the US. Kids everywhere were discussing their favorite Pokemon, and there was nothing stopping them from their quest of world domination as one of the best Pokemon trainers in their friend group. One major disappointment of the game was that there would be no Pikachu until the release of Pokemon Yellow. You did get to choose from Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle, but it felt like a major letdown without Pikachu being part of the fun. It didn't mean that Pokemon Red and Blue weren't well received. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Japan had sold over 10 million copies of the Red, Green, and Blue editions, and the United States had sold 9.85 million copies by 1997. The game was referred to as one of the quote-unquote best-selling RPGs of all time by IGN, and we definitely agree with that statement. Number 9. The excitement of an exotic drop. If you played a game like World of Warcraft back in its heyday, you would greatly understand the importance of a legendary drop. There was nothing quite as thrilling as going through a dungeon and finally getting that drop that never happened. New players don't quite get the satisfaction of this, since most games have thrown caution to the wind and switched to microtransaction. Cue sad music. Okay, now that we're done feeling sorry for ourselves, we'll praise the games that still do it the old school way. Games like Destiny still have the right idea. At level 20, you don't just grind in the game to obtain legendary gear. Oh no, if you want to continue to rank up, this is a necessity. And there are plenty of ways to get some great drops in this game. It may take a long time until a noob gets one, but there is nothing as satisfying as finally obtaining your first legendary drop. We imagine that Batman must have felt this way when he finally got to use the shark repellent spray that he had been carrying around with him just in case. That's how it feels to get a legendary drop, or as close as we'll ever get. Number 8. Item build confusion. When League of Legends was first released, and for a few years following, there was no handy helpful guides built into the game to help you with your item building. Your character was most likely not going to be the best and brightest in the game, without some trial and error. No, you would have to endure that difficulty alone, and you're going to do it live. If your teammates liked you enough, then they might give you a helpful tip or two, but most of the item building responsibility was left up to your own judgment. On top of knowing item builds, you were also in charge of map awareness, keeping your lanes clear and the turrets safe, and also memorizing all the moves of your character and timing them perfectly. Looking back, we can see why so many new players to games like Defense of the Ancients and League of Legends quickly ran the opposite direction. These games were no walk in the park, especially for new players, but for those that endured the tumultuous beginnings of these games, they would help noobs that play today. Since the games are much more new player friendly than they used to be, we're happy to see a change in that aspect, but would have been even more ecstatic if it happened sooner. Number 7. Where am I? Is this my life now? Okay, we've all been there. We're gonna need you to take a deep breath now before you go into a full-blown panic attack because you're a noob with no concept of map awareness. Map awareness is one of the first things that you should learn. We don't care if you're an 8-year-old suffering from major ADD or a grandmother who's picking up a controller for the first time. You need to have map awareness to be a good teammate. Many players that begin games that require health and ammo spawns are so fascinated with the idea of shooting weapons and controlling their characters that they forget they also have to pay attention to their health meter and ammo. Games like Halo, Call of Duty, and Overwatch require players to not only put in the effort to get better, but also the time to learn where all the health and ammo spawns are located. If you learn this, then you won't be shouting the same questions that every noob shouts into his or her mic in group chat. I quote, "Where am I? Where are the health and ammo spawns located? Is this my life now?" Sorry about that. Of course, I tend to think of it more as whining. If you don't learn to have map awareness, yes, sadly your life will continue to be at noob level. Number 6. Devastating one-shot kills. Every gamer since the 90s has experienced this devastating blow to their massive noob ego. You jump into some game bright-eyed and hopeful, and in a few mere seconds, you're eliminated and waiting for your character to respawn. It happens a few more times until you're sulking in a corner eating a bag of 3D Doritos and pondering what just happened. Here's what happened. Someone's just been playing the game a lot longer than you have. A great example of a game despised by noobs is Star Wars Battlefront, and for good reason. If you gain levels and put in a lot of your time, you will get the best weapons the game can provide. And not only do you have the best weapons, but you've also got plenty of time to practice aiming and shooting said weapon. Try to have a heart, and remember there are plenty of noobs still out there trying to get a feel for controlling their character. You don't want to be the reason they gave up gaming, or maybe you do. Either way, we're not judging, just trying to remind all those Star Wars Battlefront players that you had a first day, that you were continually gunned down by one-shot kills to the head, and you vowed to yourself that you'd never be that guy. Number 5. Delight at beating an especially difficult boss. Nobody warned you what Dark Souls was going to be like. Why didn't they tell you that it was going to be a game that would forever torture you, and by the time you finally made it to the final boss, you weren't sure whether it was real or a dream? The only thing that may have revealed what you were about to be exposed to was the slightly ominous look the cashier gave you as you were checking out, but even he knew it was too late to turn back now. Gamers since the beginning of time have played as every character imaginable, and by the time you beat one boss, you've beaten them all. We imagine it's exactly how Hugh Hefner felt by the time he let his third Playboy girlfriend live with him, at the age of 80 in the Playboy mansion. Yeah, it's a little bit different conquest, we realize. When you're a noob and you beat the boss for the first time, there is no better feeling on the planet, especially when you're playing a game as difficult as Dark Souls. There's nothing like taking down the optional Asylum Demon in Dark Souls, and you didn't even have to, but you did it anyway because you're just that awesome. Number 4. The thrill of learning new characters. There's nothing quite as satisfying as learning a new character, especially when a lot of players with more experience suggest choosing and sticking to one quote-unquote main when you're just starting off. Once you learn how to play that character, your life will never be the same, since you'll now be able to show off your epic gaming skills with 2 characters. You've almost made it to the top. In games like Overwatch, it's a contradiction to play with a quote-unquote main character, since you don't want to stick with just one character. You should be choosing your character based off of what your team's needs are. Many people forget that rule of thumb and just pick favorites. But you won't win a game without a healer, just like you won't win a game without good offensive or defensive players. It goes much the same way for games like League of Legends. Once you play these games that require team fights, you'll find your place on the team. But until then, we suggest you choose a favorite and beg the players with more experience to fill the spots that you haven't learned yet. Most people are pretty understanding when it comes to learning a new character. And there's nothing quite as exhilarating as playing and excelling at a new character. It just takes time and practice. Number 3. What does this button do? We've all been there. That first moment you open up a game like Minecraft and everything feels so overwhelming. If you're lucky enough to play with a mouse and keyboard, it's a little easier to pick the game up. But if you're one of those poor souls that decided to play the game with a controller, we can only praise your resilience. And yes, you're probably going to tell us that using a controller is the easiest method to play Minecraft with, but we're so far into the PC version that we can't switch now. You can't be successful at learning how to play a game without learning how to control your character and the world around you. In a game like Minecraft, it's best to either open up the manual or find a tutorial. No one will judge you for learning how to play the game before you start, because we'd rather see you succeed and love it as much as we do. And maybe you'll even learn a few tricks about the characters in the game. Who could forget the first time they came upon an adorably innocent looking creeper, and then suddenly it exploded, destroying everything within range of it. You quickly learned your lesson about that, and the control to run as fast as you could next time. Number 2. Finally discovering what noob means. Here's how you know you're rising up in the ranks of video games. No one is referring to you as a noob anymore. And we promise that's a good thing. If you think the term noob is an insult, which is what it currently is used for, it actually had a much different meaning back in the day. The United States Air Force used the term quote-unquote newbie to refer to a new man in the unit. It was discovered that the first use of noob in an online community was as early as 1981, and it continued to describe people new to computers and Linux. It's taken on a derogatory connotation in games like Roblox, where noob isn't just used as a term for new players, but it's also used as an insult for players of all skills. Noobs got somewhat of a bad reputation in the game after they could easily create chaos without any real punishment, since their characters couldn't be linked to actual accounts. It wasn't like you could just ban a guest player from the game. Using a quote-unquote noob or guest player was an easy way to hustle other players, since many gamers played as this character for quite some time. There was no way to tell what guest player's stats were, so even quote-unquote noobs would take advantage of the flawed Roblox system. Number 1. Bastion is the worst. Most characters have an arch enemy, and if there was one for the noob player, it would be Bastion from Overwatch. That's right, there's nothing quite like running headfirst into the character with the most dangerous amount of DPSs. When you're first playing Overwatch, it's actually pretty awful, and we don't recommend it. We're sure that the players that have been at the game a long time are going to tell us that Bastion has a counter, and yes, we're well aware that he does, but no one new to Overwatch is going to know that, unless they've read through every counter and its counter. Let's face it, that never happens, because most people learn the game through hands-on experience. Or in this case, turrets to the face experience. If you want to have a leg up in the competition and you're new to Overwatch, try an assault class like Reaper or Tracer. They're quick and sneaky and can easily target Bastion's weak spot if he's aiming for other characters. Then again, characters like Tracer and Reaper are rarely sought out by new players, since they're pretty difficult to learn at first. Tracer can surprise attack an enemy by faking her own death off a cliff, and then recalling herself back up. It's a pretty useful trick to use, especially on Bastion. What lessons did you learn as a noob? What advice do you have for any new players? Let us know in the comments down below. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check out more awesome videos in our playlist. I'll see you next time on The Gamer.